Hello, welcome to this. Hello, my name is Laureen Sims, and here's my sign name. We're so excited to, I'm so excited to host this meeting titled, Is ASL Too White? We want to support you all, and I want to introduce my co-host, Elizabeth Moore. Welcome to this exciting webinar. We're going to discuss that title, and I'm very excited to do that. Before we begin this program, I would like to introduce Dr. Melanie McCoy Cody. Please introduce yourself and come on video. Elizabeth, do you mind closing your screen and going off video? Gallaudet was set up on stolen land from the Native Americans. We want to acknowledge the stewards from there. And here we are panelists. We need to recognize the Piscataway land that we're currently on. We need to keep and cherish that land and its roots. I notice me sitting here today, I'm sitting here on that land. I also recognize Osage Dakota land, Lakota and Kickapoo lands, and all the lands of the indigenous people. Thank you. My hats are off to you. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We can't proceed without recognizing one more person that's going to give us a message that we can remember. It's going to be related to our title here. Thank you, Dr. Sims. We need to admit that that title is ASL too white. The title is very fascinating and I'm very curious about it, and many people are. However, it is a challenge that we face, so discussion is vital. And we have to admit that that's not only the only issue to our language. It also is a large part related to racism. Racism has been happening in America for a long time, especially in the Black deaf community. We need to perceive those opportunities to give the perspective coming from our community and people of color. I'm very excited to sit with you all, and I hope you all can open your heart and open your mind. We need to perceive all the different aspects of this issue. And thank you for being here, Liz. And an intern, Chief Diversity Officer. I've had such a wonderful time. And I know you know a lot about the title, about linguism and racism, oppression. We need to think about this topic. So now let's watch a pre-recorded film. And we'll take advantage of that and discuss it and analyze it with our 7 members. I'm excited to have the panelists meet other members. We're all experts in our own way, and to get the feedback after watching this. And that will be for about 15 minutes. We'll have a question and answer period after the film. And then we'll have closing remarks after that. So Matthew, if you're ready, let's play the movie. Please enjoy watching this. Is ASL too white? Is ASL too white? The question is ASL too white? The answer is yes. Yes. The question, ASL is too white? Yes, of course. In short, when we talk about this question, is ASL too white? I say yes, that's an easy answer. To answer the question, is ASL too white? The short answer is yes. To answer the question regarding is ASL too white, that white can mean different things. And when we think about white ASL, it may apply to a white person, so it's difficult to answer this. Regarding the question, is ASL too white? That's a good question for an open discussion. America is open to the English language, which is natural for them. With ASL, the majority of people who use ASL historically, if we think about America and African Americans, also use Black English. Personal experiences. My own personal experience regarding this topic is separate and is rooted inside me. I learned a lot about acquisition, having to gone to Alabama school where we learned about this, which was back in the 60s. I know that language use was different back then. I remember when I was 17 years old and I began to acquire ASL language. I thought it was important because it's important to have clear communication and be able to learn ASL because it's such a benefit for people that are deaf. Once I acquired this, it had a very positive impact on me. It was actually people that were white that I noticed different facial expressions and gestures, which was matched the ASL language. But it also was different because it's a wide environment and we try to match because we're judged or critiqued. My experience with this is with my Black friends the way that we communicate and the way that we sign was different than when I was communicating with white people. Except for my deaf brother, twin brother. We use sign language that we accepted and learned from school, which generally means, in a way, that we were seen as having skills just as white people. And that allowed us to be in advanced classes. On the other hand, I would say that language has different rules and different policies that can impact us in history. Who makes decisions about the policy and development of language? I practice teaching as a deaf educator. I set up the foundation, and it may be criticized by white people, but I do revise my work, and I do encourage my students to use sign. Now looking at the broader deaf culture, I'm curious about some of these standards that we have in education and what are used in the classroom. I even took it upon myself to read over and understand the different policies and how it's diverse from the Black and deaf communities, and again, the ASL communities. And this began different standards and curriculums within the deaf community. Excuse me, when using eye gaze and facial expressions that are appropriate in ASL, and we see these as a value. And this does differ from Black deaf students. And it greatly is affected by the community, because we need to accept those standards and how they differ in various communities. When we talk about development of ASL and writing English, it's important to learn from different research and publications. It's important that African American people are as equal as English and Americans, and from different races and ethnicities. When discussing white and Black and comparing the two, and learning ASL as a Black person, and the color of your skin, which means white, believe the same. And they have their different belief system and ideology. They believe they have a right and wrong answer. Decide what style is right and wrong, facial expressions. Excuse me. And the various aspects that they hold as priority. Because if they're using accurate ASL, they may believe that the ideology and beliefs differ. And it becomes a hierarchy where they think that they are judged, that they are more skilled. And it's not equal. And it makes me feel that, yes, ASL is too white. When talking about how to evaluate language, especially with ASL and proficiency interviews, and how they evaluate, it's important to look at that and really look at these interventions. And we think about these tools we use. We look at that and we can't continue to do the same thing that we have in the past. We need to change and have new perspectives. We need to notice that ASL is too white. And it being too white causes those standards to be evaluated, and it isn't equal. Having a Black team, ASL team, we give presentations and questions and answer workshops who are completely unaware of Black ASL. The standards are different. We need to work as a community and know that the deaf community differs. People seeing can question and have their own ideas, and to see those two responses, we can't necessarily blame them for having that differing response because it comes from what they studied and what has influenced them through the papers, through publications, and it also influences deaf education. It doesn't have efficiency in different languages and how it is founded and is set up. So again, yes, ASL is too white and it's a problem. Indigenous culture has been the pride for indigenous deaf people. Back in history, when there was institutes for deaf people, or excuse me, deaf schools, Wampanoags entered those deaf schools, and hats off to them, very skilled. These schools were not recognized, and we've seen many contributions from indigenous people. How we learn home signs and Native American signs that they use at home in local communities. And English now is, and Americans look down on this. And we know that ASL is more appropriate for teaching and learning and curriculum in the education field. Prescriptorism. We have known that indigenous people has faced different prescriptivism, and this needs to be maintained by different ways of control. In the past, we try to keep that language the way it was before, but really itself has to change throughout history. The same with racism, because that causes a lot of harm in the deaf African American community. Those standards, again, are going to change. If we think about the determination from this language, we get a lot of criticism from movies and different shows, and there's different directions to follow, and we're unsure which one's accurate to follow. It's important that those separation and segregation comes as one team and one belief that they are treated equally, but also recognizing that there's a very big difference between the two. When we think about the influences I've had on CODAs, on Black schools, or excuse me, deaf schools, we understand that also they socialize with the deaf community and the hearing community. When CODAs enter college in a teaching interpretation program and they graduate, they can be hired in the community And we need more CODA interpreters that are skilled and certified. But it does require passing a screening test. And many do not necessarily pass that, so they're put in ASL 1, and that really causes self-esteem issues and being humiliated that can be put in the first ASL class. And we see many children in the community who are being criticized because of having white teachers. It makes them feel inferior. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we are ignorant of people of diversity in sign languages. And that's seen as inappropriate. When I transferred to a white deaf school, it was completely different from the black school. I found myself having language acquired that I had learned in the past differed, and I was confused. I thought that their way was right, and I was able to make friends. And my friend said to me, "Wow, you're signing like black or like white sign language." So I decided that I was going to code switch. The black community, the black in ASL and black education was founded because of black schools. And since then we have seen black ASL from 1965. And studies were conducted and analyzed in different publications that black sign language has been developing since. When I entered an linguistics program in 2002, I was taking a variety of courses but not affiliated with Black and African American. We talk about culture and the standards in the ASL. Deaf study courses, they focus on one thing in terms of ASL and how popular it is. That's the narrative, that it's popular and the most focus is on that. The values and the values of deaf culture are sometimes lost. And it's important that all of those components are taught about ASL within deaf history classes. Sign languages, basically we went to France, and for deaf education, Laurent Clerc came and they established the school and so forth. The fact that American Sign Language is not only from a French sign language, but when you compare sign language of France to American Sign Language, it was the parental structure. When we socialize with the deaf French, we know somebody who uses deaf sign language. When you're trying to understand the conversation, you understand about 30%. So where's the rest of our history in those that are neglected and ignored? It doesn't usually give credit to the indigenous sign language that are actually rooted. And some of these signs today differ. By example, this sign that is visual, this sign was used for a month for a horse. This is the sign for arrest. There are several other examples that are similar to modern sign language that we need to honor for the African American culture studies. when we became involved with the Black ASL research, we did different interviews with the Black African American people in different states. America has about 17 schools for the deaf, but our Black Deaf ASL team wasn't able to actually visit all 17 schools, and the segregation started to happen. So we selected 6 states to interview: Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Virginia, where the segregation first happened. People that we interview, there are about 90 of them in total, from different ages, from excuse me, a group of 35 and under, who gave us information, and they told us that there is such a thing as Black ASL. When I started my doctor's studies at the university in New Mexico, I was fascinated about this community and the society of influences of society at large. I was able to improve and reinforce different methods that were more popular to other people in different workshops that we have in curriculums, and we recognize that this ethnicities. The study from Indian Sign Language began in 1994, and we have many different variations. And one of these is known as, largely from the Northwest tribes in the Southwest. And that's what my research was just published about sign language and the effects on deaf children in the American community. To incorporate language variations, there's different components. One is linguistics. And we know how they're different and how they're similar and how the past has impacted the language policies and rules and how to use the language. And then we allow access to occur. So that looks at various communities as well and how they are perceived as either different attitudes. So that's my main area of focus, having 2 different groups. And I took 2 different courses, and most of them had either taught me about race and ethnicity of the deaf community. And by taking those 2 classes together, there was a lot to think about in those different communities. The standards may have changed, the beliefs and values may have changed, education and acceptance of different jobs and how to learn with other people. All that has quite a variety, especially coming from the past until now. Ratio linguistic. is the term that was established from different publications in articles in 2015 and 17. I remember when those standards were established, and they're talking about white and black ASL and how the difference depends on the race and ethnicity, depending on the community and the language that was accepted in society in that socialization environment. And they are taught that term as well. When you talk about younger Black deaf individuals, they actually use language when they incorporate Black English from their family, their community, growing up, socializing. They acquire that English and internalize it. And then they're able to incorporate Black English. Excuse me. All those things are evidence about the deaf culture and how it can be internalized. I studied linguistics, the African American, and how they incorporated their linguistics in their deaf schools, and how it compared to their home life and what they acquired from learning over the years while they grew up. And then when they returned back to indigenous communities, many of the signs had changed from growing up. Black and white is the frame of a cowboy hat, and basically looks like, so the sign white basically looks like writing or school. And they're both signs that are used in education. They allow African Americans to sign and people of color. And sometimes those were rejected. 1817 until today has many changes. Many changes have occurred because of the Black deaf community. There, in fact, very little education about this, and really holding so much power and how it affects so many people. But most important is really something that's quite unfortunate. Because of the past, that means that we were neglected. As we notice people becoming more aware of the variations of Black deaf ASL, we have to think about decolorizing this. And it's not about picking and choosing what is something you believe in or not, it's a package deal. We need to know how the language can be equal while still understanding that they are different. The sign whale has different variations. Gallaudet has, or we have had a meeting with Gallaudet administrations, and we talked about the variations of different signs, and we talked about creating a training and how to establish and create safe spaces for those Indigenous students that were attending Gallaudet University, and that they can work together. And with the turtle sign, we have mentioned the mentorship program. So that way, if Gallaudet doesn't have resources, they can call upon receiving more services and resources. Other students in the community need to recognize that we need to decolonize this as well. Many people that are skilled are compared with people that aren't. The values don't have a separation. They're still the same. If a deaf person goes to training school, that would mean that ASL would be less controlled and less of a negative impact.